Hello there! Welcome to the second video I have made regarding the abuse I've suffered and subsequent court case I've opened on my ex-boyfriend and abuser, Kai Weiss. You are now watching part 2 of 5. This video was completed on Sunday, June 18th, 2023. Here is the video. Well, I took a 2-week break between making my first video and starting on this one. I knew that would happen. Anyways, hello again. Happy Pride Month. It's your favorite local non-binary, Omnia. This time though, I have a bachelor's degree. Well, actually, technically, I have 2 bachelor's degrees. Big grad, call me big fish. But regardless of the technicalities, in case you were wondering, yes, my college graduation was a lot of fun. I walked across the stage like 7 times for 7 different graduation ceremonies, and no, I'm not exaggerating that. I actually did do that for that exact amount of times. And while it was a very busy weekend, I can't say I regret it at all because it was just so much fun. And now that I've won the honors of honor, or however the saying goes, it's summertime and I want to get this video series over with as soon as possible so that I can finally have the truth about the situation out there and, I don't know, sip a ice cold virgin pina colada on the beach in peace or something. Psych, I'm definitely not that cool. Anyways, this intro is droning on, so let's get on with it, shall we? I said in my last video that this video would be about my protective order, where I outline all of the changes, upgrades, and provisions of said protective order that occurred over the 16 months of me and Kai's active court case. I also want to speak in detail about how the cats I'm referring to being Gabriella and Minnie, fit into the case through said protective order. So we have an odd 16 months of ground to cover and some educating to do, so let's just hop into this. Let's first talk about what a protective order is, so we can all be on the same page about that. As an obvious disclaimer, please do know that I'm speaking about legal definitions and understandings that are specific to my current state of residence, and that these definitions and procedures are unique to each state in the US. This information may or may not be applicable to wherever you live, whether that's in another state within the US or somewhere else internationally. I'm only speaking for what is common practice in my state, and of course, trigger warning for all things abuse. So, protective orders. Before my assault, I really only heard it referred to as a restraining order, and I think that's what it's more commonly or colloquially referred to as, but essentially, a protective order is a legal order issued by a magistrate or judge to protect the health and safety of an abused person, and, in the case of family abuse protective orders, which is the type I have, their family or household members. The person filing for a protective order is called the petitioner. That would be me in this case. And the person the protective order is filed against is called the respondent, which would obviously be Kai in this case. In order to be eligible for a protective order in my state, you must have been within a reasonable period of time subjected to an act involving violence, force, or threat that results in bodily injury or places you in reasonable fear of death, SA, or bodily injury. Now, you may be wondering why I qualified for a family abuse protective order with Kai and not a general protective order. After all, me and Kai were never married, nor are we blood related by any means, thank the heavens and the benevolent God above. The answer to that is simple. Kai and I cohabitated in one household, that household being my apartment, for 7 months. Had Kai not lived with me, the protective order wouldn't have qualified as family abuse and would instead be considered a non-family abuse circumstance. For additional supporting information, I'll put the legal definition of family abuse as well as the legal definition of a family or household member for my state up on the screen in case you want to read that. The abuse I experienced at the hands of Kai qualified under these definitions, which is why I was able to obtain a family abuse protective order rather than a general one. Now, this is where things get a little more complicated, so here's where you're going to want to pay closer attention. You now understand that there are 2 types of protective orders. There's a family abuse protective order, which is the one I obtained, and there's also a general non-family abuse protective order. However, of these protective orders, there are 3 other types of protective orders, which I like to think of more as phases just to prevent confusion. So, family abuse protective order, non-family abuse protective order, and then 3 phases that both types of protective orders can go through. These 3 phases are called emergency, preliminary, and permanent protective orders. Let's start with the emergency protective order phase, since that's the first type of protective order you are typically granted if you are deemed eligible for one. Emergency protective orders, or what I'll simply refer to as an EPO for the rest of the video, can only be issued by a magistrate or a judge, and it lasts for an incredibly short amount of time. To be exact, EPOs only last 72 hours or until the next session of court, whichever is later. Speaking specifically for my case, I obtained my EPO on Wednesday, December 8th, 2021, and 72 hours after that date would be Saturday, December 11th, 2021. Lucky for me, the court is closed on Saturdays and Sundays because justice stops on the weekends for whatever reason. So, like I said, an EPO lasts 72 hours or until the next session of court. So instead of needing to come into court to renew my EPO exactly 72 hours later, my EPO lasted until that next Monday, December 13th, 2021. Does that make sense? Essentially, court wasn't in session 72 hours after obtaining my EPO because it was a Saturday or the weekend, so my EPO lasted until the next nearest day court was in session again, which was that following Monday. Now, let's speak briefly about the provisions of an EPO, as in, what does it actually do? What does it actually protect a victim against? I'll flash a general description on screen now of all the conditions any EPO in my state can impose on a respondent. I'll also include a scanned copy of my own EPO on screen with legal names and other identifying information blurred. Here's what my EPO says. Request for emergency protective order. I, the undersigned, assert under oath the following. See attached complaint. The respondent, or Kai, repeatedly struck victim, sat on their chest, and elbowed them. Therefore, I respectfully request the issuance of an emergency protective order. I then signed my legal name as the allegedly abused person subscribed and sworn to me before this day by a magistrate in person on December 8, 2021. My EPO had 3 basic provisions. Here are the provisions that the magistrate granted me. Based on the above assertion and other evidence, I find that reasonable grounds exist to believe that respondent, or Kai, has committed family abuse, and there is probable danger of a further such offense against the allegedly abused person, omnia, by the respondent, Kai. It is ordered that the request is hereby granted and ordered that Kai shall observe the following conditions. 1. Kai shall not commit acts of family abuse or criminal offenses that result in injury to omnia's person or property. 2. Kai shall have no contact of any kind with omnia. Kai is also prohibited from being in the physical presence of omnia. And 3. Omnia, the family or household member, is granted possession of the premises occupied by the parties located at my address to the exclusion of Kai. However, no such grant of possession shall affect title to any real or personal property. This order is issued on December 8, 2021 at 2:54 p.m. This order expires on December 13, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Signed and verified by the magistrate. So essentially, the EPO made it so that Kai couldn't contact me or be in my physical presence, Kai couldn't assault or abuse me again, and Kai was forced to leave my apartment. And before anyone asks, well, whose apartment was it? It was mine, and it has always been mine. Here is the apartment lease where it says, among this lease made by, insert the name of my leasing office, hereinafter called owner, and insert my legal name, hereinafter called tenant, owner agrees to lease to tenant the following described property, insert my address, apartment number 7, to be used as a private dwelling only by the above named persons named as tenant, blah 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 blah. Signed by me on December 1st, 2021, which was a mere 2 days before Kai assaulted me and a week before I ran to the police to obtain my emergency protective order. Editing Omnia here, I'm realizing that this part might be a little confusing for certain viewers, so I'll dedicate a little moment to explain it. The lease I'm showing you on screen now is a renewal lease. So I've been in this apartment for 2 years. My first lease began on July 2021 and lasted until July 2022. My second lease, which is the one I'm showing you on screen and the one that is still currently active, began on July 2022 and lasts until July 2023. I told my leasing office that I would like to renew my lease for 1 additional year on December 1st, 2021. So that's what this is. And yes, if you're curious, I'm still living in the same apartment I was abused in. Whoop whoop, not for much longer though. Okay, back to the video. I blurred all parts of my legal name out for obvious reasons, except for the first 2 letters of my last name to make this point. My last name starts with the letters S-U, and I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that Kai's last name is White. He's been more than public about that fact. I'm not doxing anything that he hasn't already been vocal about. Therefore, I think that's proof enough, without doxing myself, to indicate I owned the apartment and was the only one whose name was on the lease for it. Additionally, the fact that I even have the apartment lease in my personal record should indicate to you that I am the legal owner of the property. Kai cannot pull up this same lease for the life of him because he never received the lease nor signed onto it. People also tend to forget that I was the one, and continues to be the one, who paid rent in that apartment. I paid for, and continue to pay for, all the utilities including water, sewer, and trash pickup, internet, and electricity in the house. I essentially paid every bill except for our phone bill, which was the one responsibility Kai agreed to take on during our relationship. And that isn't even a bill that relates to the upkeep of the residence or the property. But I digress. This place has always been my apartment. The EPO just ensured I remained in it for the foreseeable future to the exclusion of Kai, meaning I was allowed to stay in my apartment, Kai was forced to leave. Nothing else, just those 3 provisions. Notice also how on the scan of the EPO, This part, where it states, the allegedly abused person is granted possession of the companion animal described as blank, remains unchecked. I didn't mention either of the cats that were present in the house when I left to file for my EPO because I didn't think Kai would attempt to remove either cat from the house. This will obviously change in future adaptations of my protective order after I realized that Kai did remove one cat from the premise, that being Gabriella, better known as Gabby. Anyways, the 3 provisions I was granted in the EPO obviously forced Kai to get the fuck up out of my apartment because 1, not only is my apartment's lease signed in my name and I was the sole person contributing to rent and the upkeep of the property, but also 2, considering he was ordered not to contact me through the EPO, he could not continue to live in my household so long as I lived there. This is where the subsequent charges occur, such as the felony theft, first protective order violation, and when my channel got deleted, but the felony theft and channel deletion stuff is for a future video. Again, we're trying to keep strictly dickly to all things protective order in this video. Now that we've established that 1, the apartment has always been my property, and 2, outlined the 3 provisions of my EPO, you may be wondering what happened after my EPO expired on December 13th, 2021. Well, on December 13th, I followed the most obvious course of action. I renewed it. But like I said, EPOs only last 72 hours or until the next session of court. So how did I renew it? This is where an emergency protective order can graduate into that second phase I mentioned earlier, which is the preliminary protective order, or what I'll call a PPO for the duration of the video. Preliminary protective orders, or PPOs, can only be issued by a judge. You must obtain a PPO within a short time after you have been the victim of family abuse or other acts of violence, force, or threat. A judge will decide if the PPO will be granted based on your sworn statement. You do not have to have an EPO to get a PPO, but in my case I did, and the respondent, or the abuser, does not have to be at the hearing. Kai was not at mine. If a PPO is granted, it will last 15 days or until the final or permanent protective order hearing. I will now flash a general description on screen of all the conditions any PPO in my state can impose on a respondent. So the question that probably remains in your mind is, what are the provisions of the PPO I received? Well, they're genuinely not that much different than the ones I was granted in my EPO. Only 2 provisions were added on top of the 3 we already discussed in the EPO. Here's a scan of the PPO I received on December 13th, 2021 at 1 p.m. The court finds that it has jurisdiction over the parties and subject matter, and that 1, the petitioner, or me in this case, is a family or household member of the respondent, or Kai in this case. 2, Omnia is or has been within a reasonable period of time subjected to family abuse. And 3, in order to protect the health and safety of Omnia, or any family or household member of Omnia, a preliminary protective order is warranted. Ex parte proceeding only, the petition has been supported by an affidavit or sworn testimony before the judge or intake officer, and either Omnia is in immediate and present danger of family abuse, or there is sufficient evidence to establish probable cause that family abuse has recently occurred so as to justify an ex parte proceeding. The court orders that Kai shall not commit acts of family abuse or criminal offense that result in injury to Omnia's person or property. Kai shall have no contact of any kind with Omnia. Additional terms of this order are set forth on page 2. You may have noticed that these are the same provisions as what was discussed in the EPO. Here's page 2. It is further ordered as follows. Omnia is granted possession of the residence occupied by the parties to the exclusion of Kai. The residence is located at my address, apartment 7. Kai shall immediately leave and stay away from the residence. However, no such grant of possession shall affect title to any real or personal property. Again, this is a provision we've already discussed in the EPO. These next 2 are the additional provisions that weren't included earlier. Omnia is granted possession of the companion animal described as Gabriella the cat. It is further ordered that Kai shall not be present within 250 feet of Omnia, their residence, and their place of employment. It is further ordered that a full hearing on the petition for a protective order be held at this court on December 22nd, 2021 at 11 a.m. and that service of this order will constitute notice to the parties for that hearing, signed by the judge on December 13th, 2021. So, what exactly changed between the time the EPO was issued and the time the PPO was issued for me to have been granted possession of the companion animal Gabriella? Well, like I said, Kai was forcibly removed from my apartment after the emergency protective order went into place on December 8th. And during the time he was given to get the fuck out, he trashed my place, stole whatever the hell he wanted that belonged to me, and took Gabby along with him. And as noted on the PPO, I had been, within a reasonable period of time, subjected to family abuse and in immediate and present danger of family abuse, which is why the PPO was necessary to protect the health and safety of myself and any family or household member of mine, which I would consider includes the 2 other living, breathing beings in the household, those being the 2 cats, Gabriella or Gabby, and Minnie, that lived with me and Kai in that apartment. However, because Kai only took Gabby, I asked for her specifically to be returned to me on the PO because she was separated from my household and I did not feel like, between the 2 of us, Kai would be the safer owner to be around. It is that simple. I've been bombarded with questions like, well, did you know Gabby was originally adopted by Kai? Did you know Gabby was Kai's cat before you both started dating? Yes, of course I did. How could I not? I wasn't the one who brought her into the relationship. I still don't understand why me asking for and obtaining Gabby on my protective order was considered a smoking gun. I didn't manipulate the court order, and I didn't do it to personally harm Kai. To put this in the simplest of terms, the man is an abuser. Kai is abusive. But why did you take his cat? The reason I took his cat is very similar to the reason why he, needed to leave my house. It's because he's not someone you want to be around. He's not a safe, person to be around. It's just not tangible. He was abusive, literally. I know y'all don't want to admit it sometimes, but that's what happened. I was afraid they'd be unwell, and I wanted to protect them from that because I love them. He has demonstrated to me that he is an unsafe, volatile individual to be around in my time of knowing him. I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck who originally adopted which cat or which cat has been legally adopted under his name and which cat has been legally adopted under mine. He has repeatedly posed a threat and danger to me and to the cats living in that apartment by subjecting me and all the other living, breathing, sentient beings in that household to family abuse. In court, they asked, is this cat yours? Did you adopt this cat? And I'm like, no. I wasn't gonna fucking lie about that. People are like, oh, but you said it's your cat. And I'm like, yes, she's just as much of my cat as Minnie is his cat. Minnie's papers are with me. I paid for her adoption. I have all the information in my name. But that doesn't mean that Kai doesn't have an attachment to Minnie. Just like I have an attachment to Gabby. Him being the one who adopted Gabby doesn't mean that I can't be concerned about her well-being after having exited an abusive relationship with this man. I wanted to exhaust every resource I had. I wanted to make sure that she was fine. Hi, popping in, editing Omnia here. I thought of a good example that I think is fairly common within abusive family dynamics that could serve as a jumping off point to explain why I would want to take Gabby from Kai. Let's visualize an abusive man who has custody of his biological children from his late wife. Let's say he encounters a new woman to court and marry, but then abuses that woman throughout the duration of the marriage. Then let's assume that the woman figures out a way to escape the toxic relationship with the man. However, throughout the course of her marriage with him, she really got to know his biological children, grew an attachment to them, and considers herself not just a stepmother to the children, but a mother to them. The woman may genuinely feel a responsibility to save her stepchildren from her ex-husband's abuse, despite not carrying them herself or being biologically related to them whatsoever. She loves those children as her own and is fearful that her ex-husband will abuse them in the way that he abused her, so she attempts to gain custody of the children to save them from the possible threat of abuse the children might face in her absence. That, as dramatic and extra as it sounds, can basically explain why I would want to take Gabby from Kai. Kai is an abusive asshole in my experience. I don't want to even risk the idea of Gabby having to take the brunt of it, even if I didn't adopt her originally or know of her existence before Kai. She became my cat throughout the course of Kai and my relationship, so yes, I care for her as if I was the one who got her from the shelter. Just thought that example might help someone understand. I still don't understand why this remains a point of contention. Put simply, I asked to be given possession of Gabby on my preliminary protective order on December 13th because I was afraid of Kai harming her, as I have witnessed what he has done in the past during his frequent anger outbursts, not only to me, but to the cats as well. Kai had a lot of temper tantrum problems. he would get really upset, really mad, real fast. And he's kind of like a tornado when it happens. Like, I was just chilling on my phone, and now my phone just got thrown against the wall. It was very hard to, like, the way my apartment looks now would be impossible living with him. The shit on the wall would not be on the wall. The shit on the TV stand would be on the floor. Like, when he's mad, he will, like, literally, like, just clear a desk. And sometimes the cats were there in that room when he was like that.
When Kai is angry, Kai does not care about the consequences of his actions.
When he's angry, he kind of gives no shits about anything else. It was that way with the cats too, where it's like he threw something and the cat would get hit and then yowl, try to find a way to run out of the house or like out of the room as fast as possible. And he wouldn't have even noticed it because he was so mad. Like, he would be like screaming and yelling and then throwing shit, and the cats would just be there. It really hurt my heart to like see that happen, because I'm like, why are you so mad that you can't even see what your anger does to like fucking animals and me and things that you supposedly care about?
If he wants to displace his anger onto an object, he will throw that object indiscriminately, and it does not matter where that thing will land or who it will hit.
Anytime there was arguments and stuff, he would just not care about the cat's well-being. And if the cat's well-beings were in his way, it didn't matter. If he wanted to throw his glasses, he would throw it in whatever direction he wanted. And if it hit the cat, so fucking be it, I'm mad. Just like if he threw something and it hit me in the face, he didn't really give a fuck, because it probably felt good to displace your anger on that object and throw it anywhere. Who cares what it hits? That was the logic. And I was afraid that, I don't know, if Kai got mad at home and did something at home, the cats would be in that direct threat. And I don't want to subject them to that, because I know I'm not going to do that. Do you see my fucking house? I don't just get mad and displace it on objects. If I get mad, I go run. If I get mad, I go fucking kickbox. Like, if I get mad, I have other healthier, adaptive coping mechanisms to just go and do, instead of, like, literally destroy my physical environment to displace it on objects. But that's not Kai.
The state of my apartment after he was forcibly removed from it should be evidence enough of the type of person he is when he's angry.
Editing Omnia here for the millionth time, apologies. I also wanted to mention that Kai's anger management problems were a recurrent and long-time issue within our relationship, one that Kai was even intimately aware of. This is shown through one of the coping strategies I used throughout my abusive relationship, which was journaling. I would often vent about Kai's behavior privately in an online diary, which is where I detailed two important points I thought would be good to share in this video. Here are two screenshots from a diary entry I wrote on Wednesday, October 27th, 2021, where I'm venting about Kai. I write, "How are you going to say all the shit you said about me yesterday and still do all the things you said you wouldn't do when you're angry? Like, you're gonna say, I don't even know who I become when I'm angry, then the next day become that thing. How are you gonna say that I'm practicing to be more patient with you, then go and lose your patience the next day?" This screenshot speaks to the fact that even Kai was acutely aware of the fact that he loses sight of who he is when angry, to the point where he himself relayed to me that he doesn't even know who he becomes when enraged. The entry continues where I write, "If I did half of the shit you've done to me, you would have definitely broken up with me by now. Bruise you as badly as you did me, I would never hear the end of it. Throw your shit everywhere and disrespect your stuff just because, never hear the end of it. Tell you to shut the fuck up, fuck you as commonly as you do me, I could never live it down. I thought this part of the diary entry was important to share, not only because it demonstrates that Kai has been physically abusive with me long before December 3rd, but also I specifically write about how often he would throw objects and disrespect my belongings out of anger, just to corroborate what I said was common behavior from him and why that behavior put me in rightful fear for the cat's safety and well-being.
I think it should also be noted that this is also the state of my apartment he left Minnie in when he was forced out. If Kai is okay leaving a cat that he took care of jointly with me in an environment like this with no cat food, what does that communicate or indicate to me about his basic ability to take care of the cat he did have? Gabby. Of course I had more reason to be concerned for Gabby's safety considering he is okay with leaving Minnie behind in a trashed environment as shown in these photos. Furthermore, it is not beyond the realm of comprehension as to why a victim of family abuse would like to protect themselves, the animals they were living with under that roof, and their property from the person who, committed the act of family abuse. I know for a fact as a victim, as the one who received the onslaught of abuse from Kai, that I will certifiably be the safer, less aggressive, less dangerous option when it comes to who will or will not take gentle care of the cats. That is why Kai was forced to stay away from me, from my apartment, from my family, and from my place of employment. That is why I have a protective order against Kai, and Kai does not have a protective order against me. If Kai's unhinged enough and willing enough to abuse me and admit to doing so, what about that sort of behavior reads as a person who is responsible enough to facilitate a safe and hospitable environment for any animal? Yes, Kai adopted Gabby first, but to be honest, from what I've witnessed from him, I was afraid. I was afraid Gabby would be harmed, just as I had been harmed, just as he has historically been in my time of knowing him, abusive, neglectful, threatening, and frightening. So yeah, honestly, if you want to dock me for being rightfully concerned for the safety and well-being of the animals I took care of jointly in my household after my abuser assaulted me, trashed my apartment, and threatened me, then you have every right to dock me, but I don't think that, coming from my perspective, it is an unfair fear for me to have. Even though Kai adopted Gabby first, he has demonstrated that he is not the safest owner between the both of us to have possession of the cats, which is why I asked to have that provision added into the PPO mere days after finding out he removed Gabby from the house. At the end of the day, Kai is, and always will be, my abuser. I don't know if you guys understand that yet, but that basic fact informs many of the decisions I make in relation to this case. As a survivor of his abuse and in my time of living with him, I do not believe that Kai Weiss is capable of creating an environment conducive to peace and calm that any animal deserves, let alone any of the animals I took care of jointly with him.
Oh my god, editing Omnia here again. Sorry, these are all just off-the-cuff thoughts I thought would be good to drive home the point because the cat situation has truthfully been a thorn in my side for the longest. I just want to remind you that this is the same guy who did this to my face, who did this to my body, lied about doing so.
No, I did not abuse Hannah.
And then pled to it to avoid trial. Bruh. Just remember that. Why would I ever trust someone who is willing to act this violently to be satisfactory, let alone good company for any living thing to rely on? I personally would not trust him to take care of a pet rock.
Oh my god, dude.
That's why I asked for Gabby, and that is why I was granted possession of her since that day. And I also think it's important to reiterate that I'm not trying to make him suffer. Like, I just want good things to occur for the things that I love. And I love Gabby, and I love Minnie, and I want good things to occur for them. I want them to be safe, I want them to be happy, I want them to be able to sleep in my fucking beanbag if they wanted. That shit's so comfy. I know she's comfy. And I know that's because I'm a good cat parent, and I can't trust that the same is being said there. That's just in my lived experience, having been around Kai, and how volatile and angry he gets, and how scary that is for cats, for me, for literally anyone. That's really the extent of my explanation regarding the cats. Moving right along. At this point in the timeline, the preliminary protective order, or PPO, gets renewed over and over and over and over and over again by me for the duration of 5 months, and 5 separate times. So, as stated previously, the PPO granted to me on December 13th had 5 provisions, 3 that were kept originally from the EPO and 2 additional ones, and lasted until December 22nd, 2021. Then, that same exact PPO, with all the same provisions, was renewed on December 22nd until January 21st, 2022. Then, that PPO was renewed again on January 21st until February 25th, 2022. I think you can see where this is going. The cycle continues, so on February 25th, I renew the PPO until March 18th, then on March 18th, I renew it again until April 15th. But thankfully, that was the 5th and last time I had to renew it, because this is where the preliminary hearing occurs, and my PPO graduated from the last phase of protective orders I mentioned earlier, otherwise known as a permanent protective order.
Editing Omnia moments again, sorry. I just think it's wild that Kai has publicly stated multiple times that I quote-unquote didn't even come to court. Like, I didn't renew my preliminary protective order 5 times between December 13th and April 15th. Literally, what? All of these scans here clearly demonstrate that I was present for the court proceedings that mattered, and Kai is just upset that I didn't show up for status hearings after that point because my lawyers and victims protective aid told me I didn't need to be. This is evidence enough to prove that I was intimately involved with the case when it mattered, and not more.
On March 28, 2022, a subpoena was left on my front door indicating to me that I was summoned by the courts to testify as a witness to the preliminary trial hearing on April 15th at 11 a.m. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly is a preliminary trial hearing? A preliminary trial is a hearing done with a judge to determine if the prosecution, which would be me or the state, has sufficient evidence to actually constitute a full-blown jury trial. The prosecution must demonstrate that enough evidence exists to charge the defendant, or Kai in this case, for the 5 charges we obtained arrest warrants on him for, those being felony theft, strangulation, preventing a 911 call, domestic assault and battery, and 1 violation of my protective order. Preliminary hearings are not always required, and the defendant can choose to waive it. It's essentially like a mini trial. The prosecution will call witnesses and introduce evidence. As shown by my subpoena, I was a witness the state called upon to testify, and the defense, or Kai and his lawyer, can cross-examine said witnesses, which they absolutely did. However, the defense cannot object to using certain evidence, and in fact, evidence is allowed to be presented at a preliminary hearing that could not be shown to a jury at trial. If the judge concludes there is probable cause to believe the crime was committed by the defendant, then a trial will soon be scheduled. However, if the judge does not believe the evidence establishes probable cause that the defendant committed the offense, they will dismiss the charges right then and there. I'm sure you can guess what the outcome of my preliminary trial hearing was. Unsurprisingly, the judge determined that I proved probable cause for all 5 charges I had obtained arrest warrants on. And I must reiterate, not a single one of the criminal charges I testified on were dismissed. Every single charge carried over into the trial.
4. This disproves every other accusation toward me and adds credibility to what I've been arguing against for coming up 2 years now.
The full-blown trial was then scheduled to commence on February 16th, 2023, and I was also granted my permanent protective order that same day. This is because, in addition to the preliminary trial hearing, we also had our final protective order hearing scheduled for April 15th, 2022. Contrary to its name, a permanent protective order, or what I'll just refer to as a PO, is not permanent. It's just the longest protective order you can be granted. A judge can grant a PO that lasts for a maximum of 2 years. In order to obtain this PO, like I said, you must attend the final protective order hearing, which is scheduled at the time of your PPO hearing. The judge will subpoena the respondent, or the abuser, to be at the PO hearing. Since Kai was ordered to be in the courtroom for the preliminary trial hearing, he was also present for the PO hearing as well. Both the petitioner and the respondent will be asked to describe what happened. This PO can also be extended for an additional 2 years if the petitioner requests an extension and the judge finds that there is a need to extend protection. There is also no limit to the number of protective order extensions that can be granted by a judge. I've attached a screenshot of all the conditions any PO in my state can impose on a respondent. I'll also include a scanned copy of the PO I was granted on April 15, 2022 on screen, with legal names and other identifying information blurred. Here's what my PO says. The court finds that it has jurisdiction over the parties and subject matter, that the respondent, or Kai, was given reasonable notice and an opportunity to be heard, and that the petitioner, that's me, has proven the allegation of family abuse by a preponderance of the evidence. A motion to modify or extend a protective order order was properly before the court, or Kai has been convicted of a violation of a protective order, pursuant to blah blah blah. Accordingly, to protect the health and safety of Omnia and family and household members of Omnia, the court orders that Kai shall not commit acts of family abuse or criminal offenses that result in injury to Omnia's person or property. Kai shall have no contact of any kind with Omnia. Additional terms of this order are set forth on page 2. This order shall remain in full force and effect until April 15th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. So far so good. These are all provisions we've heard since the EPO. Here's page 2. It is further ordered as follows. Omnia is granted possession of the residence occupied by the parties to the exclusion of Kai. The residence is located at my address, apartment 7. Kai shall immediately leave and stay away from the residence. However, no such grant of possession shall affect title to any real or personal property. Omnia is granted possession of the companion animal described as Gabriella the cat. It is further ordered that Kai shall not be within 250 feet of Omnia, their residence, and their place of employment. Again, these are all the same stuff from the PPO, but these next two are additional provisions as a result of the upgrade from the PPO to a PO. Kai shall surrender, sell, or transfer any firearm possessed by himself within 24 hours after being served with this order, as follows. A. Surrender any such firearm to a designated local law enforcement agency. B. Sell or transfer any such firearm to a dealer. Or C. Sell or transfer any such firearm to any person who is not prohibited by law from possessing a firearm. Kai shall, within 48 hours after being served with this order, A. Complete the attached certification form stating either that he does not possess any firearms or that all firearms possessed by him have been surrendered, sold, or transferred, and B. File the completed certification form with the clerk of the court that entered this order, signed by the judge on April 15th, 2022. I remember walking out of the courtroom that day feeling so proud of myself for standing my ground against Kai's lawyer while he cross-examined me, proving probable cause on all 5 charges I accused Kai of committing, and on top of that, coming out of it with a full-blown 2-year protective order. But what I didn't know was that Kai and his lawyer were staying behind in the courtroom that day to file an appeal on the PO that I had just been granted. And they did. The exact same day I was granted it, Kai and his lawyer asked to appeal it. Here is a scan of the notice of appeal document that Kai and his lawyer signed on April 15th, 2022. Thing is, we didn't have this appeal hearing until September 12th. 2022, about 5 months later. But before that, a very quick interjection. Between April 15th, 2022 and September 12th, 2022, I acquired what's known as an emotional support animal certification for both Gabby and Minnie. An emotional support animal certification, or what I'll abbreviate as an ESA cert, is an official certificate for your emotional support animal. Emotional support animals, or ESAs, are basically animals that have been recommended by a doctor and appointed to provide assistance to those with a disability, visible or invisible, physical or psychological, and are recognized by United States federal law. Due to the fact that I was unfortunately diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, by my psychiatrist as a result of my abuse at the hands of Kai, I wanted to obtain an ESA cert for both Gabby and Minnie because they were both the only 2 perceptive beings that witnessed what happened to me on December 3rd, 2021 besides my abuser, so I've grown a really deep and intimate attachment to them as pets over time, who have been there for me and with me throughout the duration of my abuse, trauma, and healing journey. Here's a clip of my stream on April 22nd, 2023, further explaining what my intentions were with the ESA certification.
Kai also made note that you try to make his cat a therapy animal at some point. I can think of some reasons behind that, but it's best for you to speak on that too. Yeah, they were both my companion animals. Actually, Minnie is still my companion animal. She's right there. Do you see that little red gray part in the beanbag? Yeah, she's sleeping. But they're both my companion animal. And I did that very frankly because, one, I want to live with them forever. So when you get a companion animal like that legally recognized, you can take your cats with you everywhere you go without penalty. So that was one. It's mainly a thing that a lot of people with PTSD do, because when you have a comfort animal, that's like you're attached to them and you want to be able to take them on airplanes without needing to like pay for it. You want to be able to move into apartments that may or may not accept pets. Like, that's important to you. So companion animal, like, making that squared away helps you with all those things. So that was one. And two, to be honest, I wanted to make them both companion animals because I wanted them to stay together. So if I had them, they were together all the time. Like, they are both my companion animals. Like, I didn't want them to be separated because at a point when Kai took Gabby, the next day Minnie was like throwing up and like not eating and like not using the litter, and she was sick, and I was like, what's going on? And I found out later it was because of the sudden change of like taking a cat that was integrated in the household that Minnie had become adapted to and just removing her and never bringing her back again all of a sudden. Like, she started to get ill because her fucking sister isn't with her anymore. Like, I wanted them to be together because they became siblings. I wanted them to be safe, and I wanted them to be together, and I wanted them to be happy, and I knew that that would be the case here, but I didn't know if that would be the case there.
I received my ESA cert on July 2nd, 2022. I'll throw all the scans of the documents pertaining to it up on the screen now. You can pause at any time to read them. The only reason I'm not going to read any of them is because they're all very straightforward and speak to the points I made earlier about why I would want them as ESA animals. Kai tried to frame my obtaining ESA certs on both cats as a means to legally bar him from receiving Gabby after I was granted possession of her on my protective order.
I could imagine that you wanted them to help with the recent abuse you went through, but he made it look like you did it to legally keep his cat by unjustly means. No. No. I'm not trying to make Kai suffer. I think people don't understand that.
But as you'll see from the September 12th hearing, ESA certs don't override decisions made by a judge in circuit court. And again, that was never the intention behind why I obtained an ESA cert on either cat. A common theme you will quickly begin to realize as a result of this video series is that Kai is far too often of the belief that I move through the world with the intention of spiting him or going out of my way to bother him.
Omnia's taking Gabriella, like, legally. I have, like, no choice in the matter. So that's the specific cat that Omnia's taking. I don't know why Omnia's taking her. I think it's just a matter of, like, Omnia just kind of just being spiteful and angry. And it would make sense if, like, I was actually an abusive person. I think it's really weird that somebody can just kind of, like, just go to the police and say that this happened, and then, like, they take all this action before, like, they ever even make a guilty verdict. It's really shitty. Like, the court system is really shitty. I would be a little bit more open to allowing Gabriella to be with Hana every now and again if we didn't break up in such a destructive way. If I don't know what enabled them to, like, keep Gabby. And it's like, I would imagine if, you know, Kai Weiss is just this horrible, abusive person. Like, I don't know why you would want to keep your abuser's pet. I think that's really weird.
When in reality, all I ever am thinking about is what is in the best interest of the cats and how can the cats be treated in the ways they deserve. But I digress. That's my honest explanation about the ESA certification for those that were wondering. Back to the appeal hearing. By the time September 12th rolled around, Kai, for some strange reason, fired that same lawyer that helped him acquire the appeal, so he represented himself at the hearing. My lawyer and I were worried because we didn't know why Kai wanted to appeal the 2-year protective order I was granted on April 15th, but once the hearing began, it became very obvious very quickly that Kai only wanted to appeal one provision of the PO. That one being, you guessed it, my possession of the companion animal described as Gabriella the cat. That is what my lawyer was talking about in this part of phone call 2.
He did not recall absolutely everything, but he did recall that one of the issues in the case was that he remembered the issue with the cat.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to that lengthy protective order hearing.
Right.
And he was able to demonstrate that he brought the cat to the relationship.
If you watched part 1 and were wondering what he was referring to by that, this is what that is. The hearing was very cut and dry. Kai told the judge that he brought Gabby into the relationship and that he was the one who originally adopted Gabby before meeting me. The judge, without any consideration of other nuance, said, well, if Kai was the one who originally adopted Gabby, then possession of Gabby should be given to Kai. And that was it. Literally. The judge didn't consider anything much farther than that. He didn't consider the fact that Kai stood indicted for 6 charges at that point, a good portion of those being aggressive in nature, such as domestic assault and battery or strangulation. He didn't even consider the implications of what taking care of Gabby would look like should Kai get arrested for a significant portion of time. This is where my lawyer advocated for me and we reached a compromise. Kai was was to receive Gabby back, and that provision of the protective order was to be appealed. However, it would be replaced with a different provision. I'll show this protective order on screen now. It's the exact same as the April 15th protective order, so I won't read it. However, two fundamental things changed. One, it is now active until September 12th, 2024 instead of April 15th, 2024. And two, instead of me being granted possession of the companion animal described as Gabriella the cat, the new provision at the very bottom of the second page reads, should the respondent, or Kai, receive significant incarceration time, the order is without prejudice to the petitioner asked to return the cat Gabriella to them under this protective order. Apologies for the cutoff, I don't know why they wrote it all the way at the bottom. Either way, I returned Gabby to Kai that same day, and despite many tears of sadness, I can only hope that she is being taken care of well wherever she finds herself. I can't, and probably never will, trust Kai again for pretty much anything, but I can at least say that I have faith that Gabby will be okay. And that's all that matters to me. I don't care about Kai, I just care that Gabby is alright. And if she is, that's good enough for me. And that concludes the first half of my video regarding all things concerning my protective order, including every update, upgrade, and provision, including the timeline of each adaptation and full transparency about all things cat related. The next topic I will be covering is the 4 protective order violations. Initially, I was going to have all things protective order related squashed into one huge video, violations included, but I love myself, so I split it up into 2 parts. I'll be going into more detail about each PO violation as well as debunking any lies Kai made about them in his most recent video about the case. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Bye!